Hope that music plays again. There we go. Instagram. We are 8:30 Mountain Time. We're live on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, X, and now Instagram. So I think we are good to go. We are good to go. Good morning, everybody. How's everyone doing on a beautiful Tuesday? I learned, we're just working our way through these. Is that even straight? I think it is. Yeah, who knows? We're working our way through these live streams. And so yesterday I was looking at the stream, and it was obvious that there was about a minute of downtime at the beginning of the podcast, which is annoying. So I'm trying to find some music to put into that. So the StreamYard software platform that I'm using has some pre-canned music. So that was called Feeding Ducks or something that you were just listening to, if in fact that worked. But I was also talking with one of my favorite artists that I know in person last night, just texting with him, and maybe we're going to come up with something custom for Mornings with Scott. All right. Shall we get started? Gave everybody a chance to get in. Let's get at this. Luxury Wall Street Journal reports. Wall Street Journal reports last night that luxury goods sales are down, indicating economic trouble. Let's get started here. So Hugo Boss cut its sales outlook for the year, becoming the latest high-end fashion player to warn about consumer spending levels for luxury goods. And this is after the day before, I guess it was on the weekend, that the German premium, on the weekend that luxury brand Burberry and watchmaker Swatch earlier in the day sounded caution on current sales trends, and Burberry cut its dividend as a result and replaced its chief executive officer. I almost did a story about that Monday, because the CEO of Burberry was brought in to do a turnaround. That didn't work out, or it's not going very well. So I'm always interested in turnaround leaders and success and failures and what we can learn from that. Anyways, that story didn't make the cut, but here we are. The trend continues that the sales of luxury goods are significantly declining. And so I know what you're thinking. I know what you're thinking at this point. You're saying to yourself, Burberry, Swatch, are those brands? What are those? Well, if you were alive and paying attention in the 90s and early 2000s, Burberry and Swatch were hot. Burberry itself has been around since 1912, I believe it was created. So it's had many spikes in the popularity of its brand and many dips. Apparently, we're in a dip right now. Swatch was 1983 and was the coolest, hottest thing for a long time. For those of you that are older, do you remember the Swatch watches and how they would tick on your hand? They were pretty cool back in the day with the different colors and designs. Anyways, now you just don't see them anywhere. Burberry in particular, you don't see them anywhere. And so all of their sales are down. They're going through troubles. And one of the things that Hugo Boss has to say is that the key problem facing the luxury market is a lingering downturn in China, where high-end spending habits have dried up after helping drive the growth of luxury goods, particularly handbags and cosmetics, for quite some time. Economic data in China, which you should never believe, but economic data in China slowed sharply in the second quarter, in part due to tepid consumer spending. As I said, don't believe the data in China, but things aren't going well. Don't believe the economic data in our part of the world either, particularly during election year. Most things are skewed, in my view, or made up and then corrected later. And so I don't believe any of this, but you could just feel it if you're if you're a consumer, if you've been hit by inflation, yet you're on fixed income, more or less. If you are running a business with higher interest rates and higher input costs due to inflations, you can feel that things are not going well. Luxury giant LVMH, Moet, Hennessy, Louis Vuitton. That's quite the name, huh? Reporting next week is going to be the investment bankers think or the traders think is going to sort of really set the tone for what's really going on in luxury goods here. But again, Hugo Boss said Monday that persistent macroeconomic and political challenges are dampening consumer spending. So why does this matter? It matters, by the way. I'm going to keep going back to, I'm not getting comments on StreamYard. If you're listening somewhere, give me a comment. Just say hi. Just say hello. Tell me what platform you are on. That will help us understand this platform, this StreamYard a lot better than we are. So why do we care? Why do we care that luxury goods sales are down? Well, we are heading for trouble, or we are already in economic trouble, likely globally. And if you're running a business, if you're an entrepreneur, or even you just try to make ends meet with your family budget, you have to survive the downturn that I think that we're already in, right? I heard a story yesterday. I don't know where I read it. Maybe it might have been on LinkedIn. Somebody telling the story about you have to survive the dips, right? You can go along through life, but you have to survive the downturns. And there was a parable or whatever about is that the right word? There was a story, anyways, about a 6-foot man drowning in a 5-foot average depth river. Average depth. There's downs, there's ups, but average is 5 feet, and the 6-foot man drowns. It made me chuckle. I like that story. According to JP Morgan, sales of luxury goods often signal consumer confidence. When consumers feel financially secure, they go out and buy more stuff, non-essential high-end items. And conversely, when they don't feel secure, they stop buying high-end items. And also from JP Morgan, the luxury sector is typically it's somewhat resilient to economic downturns, but not entirely immune. It's considered late cyclical. So, things start to go down, you're still buying your Chanel handbag to make yourself feel better. But as we get towards the end of this cyclical dip, the luxury goods are not immune. Things go down, and that's what we are seeing. So the global economy is not doing well, no matter what government data may be saying. No matter what governments are pitching you, remember, always beware of any economic reporting on inflation, on jobs, on GDP growth, on anything from any country during an election cycle. And out of China, I think we just have zero visibility on the accuracy of that one way or the other. I'm not picking on it. I'm just saying that's just the fact. We don't have any visibility on what's going on, other than we can feel that things are not good. Things are not good. So the global economy is crashing, and as more evidence of that, commercial bankruptcy filings in the United States, particularly Chapter 11. Chapter 11 is where a U.S. company, a business, usually a larger business, can't pay its bills in a timely manner, is getting pressure from its creditors. It goes to a bankruptcy judge, to a court, and says, hey, judge, madam judge, we need your help. Just stop everybody from coming after us. Put a stay on these creditors and allow us to go through a process to create a restructuring. And in a restructuring process, what are you doing? You're figuring out how to cut costs, cash flow positive, and pay out old creditors that were just stayed by the judge over a period of time at however many cents on the dollar, right? That's basically what a restructuring is. And it may involve a sale of the entire business or liquidation of the assets, however is best to maximize recovery for the creditors in the order that they are due. So that's sort of like a top-down Chapter 11 process in the United States. And those filings, let's see here, up 70% in June 2024, year over year. And overall commercial filings were up 28%, indicating heightened financial distress among businesses. So those are new statistics. Bankruptcy filings in the U.S. up huge. Similarly in Canada, 58.6% growth, particularly in accommodations, food services, construction, retail, trade, just basically across the board. I would suggest to you that this is happening in manufacturing as well. And I would also say, just as I was logging on to come talk to you, there was there's a frequent news bulletin from called the Insolvency Insider. It's a news service that we get for the industry in Canada. And if you're in Canada and you are interested in the insolvency restructuring business, Google Insolvency Insider, and it's I think it's free, and you can just register, and you get a email download to your system, and it's got lots of good news on there all the time. It's a terrific service, and a good guy that owns and operates that business. So I'm logging in, and I get that to my inbox, and what does it say in big bold letters? More CCAAs predicted. What is a CCAA? Just think of, I already explained to Chapter 11 in the US from a top-down perspective. CCAA, Companies Creditors Arrangement Act, is the Canadian, more or less, equivalent of that to help businesses restructure. One such CCAA was in June 13, 2024, Indiva Limited, a leading Canadian producer of edibles. This is the cannabis marijuana business if you're in the US. Edibles, public company, filed for protection under the CCAA. I always try to pay attention to the cannabis business, the marijuana business, because we've got a lot of expertise in that area, particularly in the restructuring side, but not just the restructuring side, and the investment banking and the financing and the operations. And so we try to pay attention to that. And this one is typical, very, very typical, but we can use it as an example to learn more about the process of restructuring and mergers and acquisitions, buying and selling a business in a troubled situation. So they got court approval under the CCAA, which allows them to maintain operations while it develops a restructuring plan. The order provides the company with a stay of proceedings, protecting it from creditor actions during the period. So exactly as I said on the Chapter 11, it's the same in Canada with the CCAA. Is the company's in trouble, can't pay its bills, starting to get lawsuits. Maybe the government in this industry, the government might be coming after you for excise taxes because no cannabis companies could really afford to pay the excise tax the way the regime is set up. And so you go to court and you say, we're not going to survive. People are going to seize our assets. We're going to go out of business. We're going to lose all of these jobs. And our creditors are going to get less recovery than otherwise they should if you help us and we plan this out. So let's just put a stop to everything. That's what you're asking the bankruptcy judge to do. And let's work on a restructuring plan. And that's what this court order says. To do that, you have to explain to the judge why you're in this trouble. And Indiva said that they face significant financial difficulties because of a fragmented cannabis market and obligations to creditors. The company has been unable to meet these obligations, prompting its decision to seek protection. So that's just kind of legal blumph, boilerplate stuff. The truth of the matter is there was too much competition in Canada and too many people spending too much money. How do I put this on mute for a second? There we go. Too many people getting access to too much money and spending it building out infrastructure so that they could flood the market with product, which drove down prices. And of course, the black market in this cannabis industry was not just going to go silently into the night. And so they dropped their prices as well. And the bottom line is the price of the cannabis plunged, margins were squeezed, margins became negative quite common in the industry to have a negative gross margin, and it forced the entire industry to rationalize, cut costs, merge, do anything they could to lower the cost per gram of bringing the product to market. And when you do that, when you try to affect change, when you try to break break fixed costs contracts like leases, the only way to do that is through a bankruptcy restructuring, through a CCAA. If you're in Canada, probably a Chapter 11. If you're in the US, and there are, well, we'll talk about that in a minute. There is one other mechanism in Canada for doing this outside of a CCAA, but it's more expensive and not as appropriate. So where are we here? They had financial troubles. They had leadership changes. One of their board members, Rachel Goldman, it says here, resigned from the board. I don't know that this is hugely material, but I always talk to you on the channel about the need for turnaround leadership. You have to have leadership that is right for the period of time that your company, your business is about to go through. And a lot of the board members of these public companies, particularly cannabis companies, but public companies in general, they don't want to be on the board when the company goes through an insolvency filing. Well, one of the primary drivers of not wanting to be on the board, and I'm not saying this about this Rachel Goodman, I have no idea who she is or what the backdrop for this story is, so I'm not trying to mind read here, but I can tell you that often directors don't want to go through this process for personal reasons. And the personal reason is they're in the business of being a director on a board of director of a public company. And if you go through an insolvency restructuring process for the rest of your career, basically, you need to disclose to regulators every time you fill out a PIF, a personal information form, that you are on a board of a company that went through this process, which is ridiculous. It's the government putting a bad stigma on a process that, in fact, is a piece of legislation from the government. True, a different government, but provincial or state versus federal, but still you're putting the government, the regulators put directors in a position where they're not supposed to be associated with an insolvency filing, when in fact the insolvency filing is the exact right thing to do for stakeholders. I don't blame the board members for this. I blame regulators for this. But the fact of the matter is, board members don't want to go through this process. They want to get the hell out of there or find some other way to do it. And not because that's the right thing for stakeholders, but because it's the right thing for them. And they are a stakeholder. Again, I'm not picking on the directors for this. Hey, good morning, Ion. See you there. Thank you. And I see you're on YouTube. So that's cool. One of my comments definitely works. I'm also looking for comments on Instagram because I'm not sure that they show up on my screen on this platform. Anyways, so they had people bailing ship, as I said. By the way, when I used to join boards of directors of public companies, and I'm in the insolvency restructuring business. I'm not in the insolvency business. I'm in the turnaround business, but I use insolvency as a tool all the time. And I used to get to this section where you're supposed to list them all in the last however many years. And I just used like, have you ever done this? And I literally would write in my form all the time. Too many to even mention. And when I would do that, the regulators seemed to be fine with that answer. But that's how I felt about all my PIFs. So like, it was literally impossible for me to list them all. I have a lot of sympathy for the directors on this particular issue, that's for sure. And so one of the things that you might do in this restructuring process, and Indiva, the cannabis company, is going to do, is you go through a sales process. Okay. And so how does this work? Well, you've gone to the court and you've said, hey, Madam Judge, I need protection. I want to put a stop to everything. But you also have these creditors. I talked about this on the show before. These secured creditors. So these are creditors that have a priority claim specifically on the assets of the company. Think about your personal house. Well, there's a mortgage on it. I mean, you may have utility bills related to your house, right? You may have maintenance bills related to your house, but you have a mortgage. The creditors associated with your house don't have a call on your house, but the bank does. right? Because they have specific security in the form of a mortgage charge over your piece of real estate. And so there are secured creditors, and you can't go through a restructuring without the blessing and the cooperation, reasonably speaking, of your secured creditor. So really, often in these situations, the secured creditor is the first secured lender, like the bank or the party that's acting as the bank, works in cooperation with the company and says, hey, I want to get my money back, but you can't pay me back. And I don't think I'm ever going to get my money back, or at least I'm not going to get 100%. And so we need to work together on a recovery. Otherwise, I'm just going to bankrupt you and liquidate the assets and get nothing. Because what choice do I have? You're losing money every day. And so companies very often get into this position. And then at Indiva, you have a first secured creditor. And what are the options for a first secured creditor, a lender, to try and get their money back, to maximize their recovery? Well, there's only a limited number, maybe 4 possible options in the universe of options. Well, I mean, there's equity. You could raise a bunch of equity, but let's take that off the table as a possible option, because if you're losing money, if you have negative gross margins, who the hell wants to invest in your stock, right? So one of the things that you can do is you can sell the business, as we say, as a going concern. Here's an entire business. You, a third party, can buy this business, and you can pay as much as we can get out of you. And when you get the business, you get everything, but you don't have to pay. All you have to pay is the purchase price. You don't have to pay all of these other creditors, right? Because let's say you had creditors of $100 million. I'm just making up numbers, $100 million, and you decide that you want to pay 20. Well, the 20 goes to the first ranking creditor, and $80 million worth of creditors didn't get paid anything, right? Or there's some sort of proportionate sharing, and the shareholders get nothing. So there's a shortfall, right? And you're allowed to do that in this restructuring process, a Chapter 11 or a CCAA. So you can sell to a third party, and you can say in the sales process, in the marketing process, this is going through a restructuring. You will get these assets free and clear. No one's going to sue you. It's in Canada called a vesting order. The court's going to say, hey, congratulations, you won. Good luck to you. And you don't owe anybody any other money. So that's cool. So that's one option. Just sell it to a third party, or support management. So, or a change management team, bring in a turnaround advisor, and work with that turnaround advisor or existing management to create a turnaround plan. And the idea there is, okay, if you sell it, we're not going to get enough money to satisfy me, but there's a pathway to profitability. Future cash flow equals value, and the business will be more valuable in the future if I support you than it is today if we just try to blow this thing out. And so often you see chief restructuring officers, chief transformation officers, interim executives, just general people that come in to try and help the existing management team, who by definition have not succeeded at turning the business around. I mean, that's always the case, no matter what they might try to sell you. And so you need to bring in somebody to help them do this transition. And so there's an option for the lender. Another option for the lender is to buy it themselves through a credit bid process. And Stalking Horse, just save that for a minute. The idea there is that no one else is going to give you the cash to buy this business, and you want to own the equity upside so you can step in and own the business yourself. And so we'll talk about that in a second. Or if all of that fails, you can just liquidate. You can just have an auctioneer come in, sell this a piece of equipment, sell that piece of equipment, try to blow out your inventory, which is going to give you, one would think, the lowest recovery value as a secured lender. So how do you decide? How do you decide which option that you want to do? Well, you go to market. And if you are the secured creditor working in cooperation with the business that is in the restructuring, and is going to go to market in what's called a sales process, a sales investment solicitation process, a SIS. You go to market and you see what the market says the business is worth. And if you're the creditor, you can do it with what's called a stalking horse bid. A stalking horse bid is a bid by the creditor to establish a floor price. It's like, if I'm owed $1 million, I'm going to bid 800,000 myself, and therefore don't bother even coming in at 200,000, right? That's kind of how a stalking horse wins. But if you come in at 900,000, you beat me. You beat me. And so I've set the floor for an auction sale process. And so that's what happened at Indiva on July 5th, which was just announced in the news recently, which is why I'm a week late getting this information. But on July 5th, the court approved the sale process, the CISP, as I said, sales investment solicitation process. So they're going to go to market last week, July 10, and then you have to have your bids in. And so you go to market, you say, hey, people interested in buying these sorts of businesses, have your bids in by August 26th. So you get basically 5 weeks. Is that what that is? 5 weeks to go in, do your due diligence, prove that you're a worthy bidder, that you have the cash, and that you've got your management on side to run this place. It's almost an impossible task, the way that's set up, but you're going to the market in a quick transaction. And the idea is that you close probably sometime in early September on that timeline. And to do that, Sundial Growers, which is the secured creditor of Indiva, put in a stalking horse bid, right? As I said, they set the floor because they're the first secured creditor. And think about the options back to our 4 sort of universe of options. They put in the stalking horse bid, so they know that the minimum that will come out of that process is the amount of that they bid for themselves, right? So they're basically going to pay themselves. There's no cash written, or often there's no cash written to buy the company because they're already the secured creditor and they're facing a shortfall. So they do what's called a credit bid. It's like, if I'm owed $1 million and the ultimate purchase price is 800,000, it's like, I pretend that I wrote you a check for 800 and then you wrote me a check for 800 because I'm first secured creditor. So there is no cash being traded. That's a credit bid in that situation. I hope I explained that relatively well. And so SNDL valued the company at, it says here, $25 to $28 million in the stalking horse, but they're already owed $18 million, potentially more, for what I saw as probably more closer to 25, 28. But at the time of the filing last June, it was 18 million. They probably supported the company during the process. So we don't have hard information on what they're owed. But the bottom line is it's a credit bid. So if I want to beat them, if I want to buy this business in a fair auction process, I have to write a check for more than the stalking horse, for more than, say, $28 million on 6 weeks notice. Whereas the creditor, SNDL, all they have to do is this credit bid where they don't have to write a check at all, because they already lent the money before. From SNDL's perspective, the first secured creditor, they either own the company with no debt whatsoever. So they own the company with no debt whatsoever, or they received in cash more than they had agreed to, than the amount of the stalking horse. So they received more than the $28 million, which is probably all their money back. And so they haven't really had to decide on whether to buy it themselves or to sell to the market. The process itself goes to the market and the question gets answered for them. And then once they own the thing, if there's no turnaround plan to create value, or the whole thing looks like it still sucks, you can just liquidate it, right? They could do that. So it costs them no more money to credit bid. And that's the way a lender should be, and often does, think about their options in this particular situation. Just a quick note on valuation, because we're out of time here. At $28 million, the trailing 12-month revenue on Indiva was $38 odd million. And so you would have thought that cannabis companies would be trading at, say, 1 to 1.5 times revenue on a valuation, and that is not what this stalking horse bid is. So it does appear that there's some upside. But you know what? There's no buyers in this industry. Like, there's very few buyers with cash. That's the real problem. The real problem for a lender in this particular industry is the regulatory regime is so messed up. Management teams are under such distress, no matter how good they are, that you really just can't find buyers that are willing to write a check to go into this situation. And the CIS process requires a check. All right, those are all of my prepared remarks for today. As I'm choking to death here, I think that's it. Thank you for listening. Anybody have any questions, you can send them afterwards. There was a question on YouTube from yesterday's. I responded in the notes in the comment section on YouTube, and I think that is all. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow, 8:30 Mountain Time, 10:30 Eastern.